What piece of junk did you find that turned out to be valuable? I found a small envelope with a few inches of wire in a junk shop. Bought it, $2 because it had some faded penciling about Troy's. Turned out to about 1.5 troy ounces of platinum wire. Sold it for $600. Who's Troy? Years ago I bought a condo in foreclosure. We couldn't go inside, just look from outside and put in a bid. My bid won. When I went inside the place it was pretty trashed. I checked all the rooms, calculating the costs of getting it back into shape. At the end of my walkthrough I went into the garage and saw there was a car under a tarp. I pulled the tarp back and saw a 1972 Barracuda in nearly mint condition. Found a fake Cartier watch in Goodwill for $10. Bought it because it still looked nice. But it's a real Cartier watch and it's worth $1,000 plus. Keeping it because I'd never buy myself something like that. I'd never buy myself something like that. But you did, albeit for $10. Dad carried around a junk guitar for 50 years. Ugly as heck sunburst Gibson acoustic. Circa 50s or 60s, can't remember, that he eventually sanded down into something prettier. When I was learning he took it to be tuned up by our neighbor who owned a shop and was a collector. Dude came back exasperated and told us that my dad had sanded about 50k off the guitar, and that it would have been totally worthless if he hadn't left the logo on. I got to sand it and was grimacing pretty hard, not going to lie. I found a very small, round piece of metal on the floor in my workplace. I couldn't figure out what the item was and knew I should just discard it, but felt compelled to keep it for some reason. That afternoon my coworker was distraught. The unique type of battery that her cochlear implant needed fell out, and was probably in a dumpster somewhere because the cleaners had come through. I gave her the weird piece of metal in my pocket, and she almost burst into tears from relief. Either that or she was crying because she thinks I'm the type of person to steal batteries from cochlear implants. Old folded up piece of paper in the bottom of a box my dad had I found cleaning up the house. Torn up and faded. Turned out to be a 90-year-old original Giancarlo poster worth roughly $20,000 after spending $1,000 for restoration. Well, a dickhead couch surfer who crashed in my guest room for a few months left behind a 1970s Fender Super Twin Tube amp worth $1,800 he didn't know about. It made cleaning up his pee bottles worth it. Please tell me you played it. Someone gave me a hideous purse out of a box on its way to Goodwill. I sold it on eBay for $1,100. I've had some good flips, but that was the best. Was it some expensive brand or something? I know purses can get expensive but assumed not much resale value. My friends and I were at a concert and found this broken bracelet under a merch table as we were about to leave the venue. It had an interesting engraving on it, something about being a son and friend. Because it was broken we were thinking about just tossing it, but ended up throwing it in our backpack to bring to the office later. My friend worked at the venue so she was going to turn it in. The next week I was browsing Reddit on a thread of the same kind of music we were listening to at the show, and just as I was about to fall asleep, someone's post caught my eye. It said something like, "This is a long shot but I lost something," and it piqued my interest so I clicked it. It was someone from that same show asking if anyone had found a silver bracelet. Turns out it was the same one we found and it seemed to be a special gift from the person's parent and they were looking for it. We connected and got the bracelet returned to the guy, and the whole interaction is actually in my Reddit history. It's a fun, albeit quick, read. A few years ago, I was looking through the Goodwill website that lets you bid on stuff that you find. I stumbled across one of the Texas Goodwill's pages, and then saw an auction for a huge box of phone accessories that no one was bidding on. I started looking through all the pictures, started researching some of the brands, and started realizing the whole box was worth a decent bit. I took a shot and made my bid. Someone else saw what I saw and started a bidding war with me, but I eventually won with a bid of $106, then $24 for shipping. A few days go by, and I finally get the box. Well, 2 boxes, and they were both huge. Started taking inventory, and ended with 100 iPhone chargers, 100 Android chargers, about 250 iPhone 8 cases in all different styles, 80 battery packs, a few iPad cases, and about 1,000 screen protectors. Turned my $130 total investment into an eBay business and made almost $8,000 in about 9 months. Shop Goodwill has a lot more watches than it used to and they do a much better job of price checking stuff. It's kinda unfortunate. So my family went to a nearby town's vintage sale thing. My dad found this dirty old glass milk bottle and he got excited when he found it. I didn't know what he found so exciting since it was just a milk bottle. After we got home, he explained that it was a milk bottle from a dairy farm. One of the co-founders of that farm was my great-great-grandfather on my dad's side. When one of the world wars began, he sold it off to the other founder, TLDR. My dad found a glass milk bottle, and I found out I'm a descendant of wealthy dairy farmers. Not much monetary value but a lot of emotional value. Wholesome. Bought a cheap Martin guitar because I was broke and wanted to play. I didn't think much of it at the time, but it's worth a few grand now because it was a limited edition thing. It's still appreciating to the point where I had to insure it. Martins tend to have a great sound, or at least every one I've ever played. My mom in college worked for a small grocery store. She was sweeping aisles one day when she found a bracelet and just threw it in the lost and found for someone to come back for later. Months went by and I guess the employees got to check the lost and found for anything they wanted if no one claimed it. She remembered the bracelet and just grabbed it. She got it home and cleaned it up. It ended up being a Tivol bracelet wrapped with real diamonds. It's since been turned into a new wedding band for her, LOL. Now that's a lucky find. Now that I am thinking about it, I kinda feel bad for the person who lost it. When I was younger, I would rummage around the drawers and cabinets in my grandmother's house, just adventuring and discovering, which is what I called it. I happened to find this old folded piece of paper, but it only took 3 seconds for me to just disregard it and push it aside. I think I was trying to get something else that I saw. After I finished with whatever I had, I picked up the piece of paper to throw it away. Out of childlike curiosity, I opened it up and saw the words in it. It looked like a letter. It seemed important. So I gave it to my grandmother, who gave it to my mother when she came to pick me up. My grandmother is blind. Come to find out, it was a love letter from my grandfather to my grandmother. That really made their day. My father-in-law goes junking occasionally for side cash and strange gifts. One day he shows up randomly with a first-gen Fatboy PS3 with backwards compatibility. He goes, "Hey, I don't know if you can use this, but I thought you might enjoy it." Somebody had it sitting out for garbage. I fired it up fully expecting to have to do some repairs, but it booted up and plays just fine. He refused to take any money for it. He can be a real stand-up guy. I was at an estate sale and bought a few paintings. Sweet lady told me to take the last one I liked as package deal since I ran out of cash. Turns out one of them is a pretty rare original print worth about $3,500 and I paid maybe $30 for all 4 prints and paintings I wanted. A couple years ago I bought a rifle bipod at an antique store for like $15. I was going to keep it for an airsoft gun, but it didn't have any markings on it and couldn't figure out what it was. So I made a post on a gun forum asking for info. Turns out I bought a 65-ish-year-old bipod for an experimental version of the M14 rifle. There were only about 5 of my bipod ever made, and the guys sent me pictures from a rifle museum backing it all up. I sold it a day later for $400, but they told me if I found the right buyer it'd be worth $800, $1,000. That's pretty crazy. When I was young I got to see a guy shoot the only Panker jackhammer combat shotgun in existence. I didn't realize that that gun is worth more than I'll ever make. Was fishing at family's cottage, pulled up a fishing rod. Hotch turned out to be the one my grandfather passed away, got as a birthday present and loved it but lost about 8 years ago. I love this one. What a great thing to reel in. Well, if my mom were to respond to this thread, original Harry Potter 1st edition Philosopher's Stone novel. It's very rare to find them and they sell pretty well, but she threw it out. So salty. Bought an old copy of The Wizard of Oz at a flea market for $30. When I got home and researched it more, it turned out to be a 1st edition. When I was a little kid, I liked to climb under and hide inside the racks of clothes when my mom was shopping. One time I found what I thought was one of those cheap 25-cent plastic rings that you put a quarter into the machine and it spits out. I think that was basically my only understanding of what a ring was at that age, but I showed my mom what I had found, and as it turns out it was a massive diamond engagement ring. I specifically remember that it had tape around it, which my mom explained was probably because it was too big, and whoever was wearing it was trying to make it more snug to their finger. We gave it to the teenager girls who were working the cash register, hoping the person who lost it would return looking for it, and it would get returned. My mom says she kind of regrets doing that because she thinks that the girls probably pawned it and split cash. Probably should have taken it to the police or something, but who knows. I like to think that it did make its way back to the rightful owner. Should have asked to put up a flyer on the window for a missing ring and your mom's number, so she could ask the callers for a description of the ring and give it to the first person who says it had tape on it. I found a book at a trash bin, The Wind in the Willows. I never got to read it as a kid. After finishing it, I googled the edition date. Turns out it's a collectible worth $300. Who knew? Typical not me but a friend. She found a copy of a Salvador Dali painting at Goodwill. She loved him and it was a big print, so she grabbed it for like $20. She took it home and took it out of the old junky frame, and it had a stamp of authenticity on the back, and she had it assessed and it's worth $20k. Lucky bee. Huh. My mom did the same thing, except hers was a Tabuna painting and she found it for $2 and sold it for around $15k. My dad and I are both mechanics and as we both try to see how many tools we can find on the side of the road. It's shocking how many things are left behind at work sites or else fall off of trucks. A few of the things we've found: 2 framing hammers, 2 measuring tapes, a 40 inches push broom, various ratchet straps, a functional fluke multimeter, a 5-foot crowbar, and various other odds and ends. Always keep your eyes peeled. Sometimes this pastime can be dangerous when it involves pulling over on the highway, so be careful. You'd think there would be a crapload of random 10mm sockets lining the roadways, but I've never found one. I've lost at least 6 of them, though, in some ungodly nether dimension hidden deep behind the engines of yesteryear. Garage sale box of junk for $5. Had a rare Eisenhower silver medallion that was for a beating in South America. It was on eBay for 30 seconds and sold for $500. Telescoping Luke action figure, $300. I'm a coin dealer, so I see some cool stuff. Cleaning out my grandparents' house after my grandma passed away and had to throw out or donate actual hundreds of books. Most were worth nothing and very worn down. In the second to last box were original copies of the Harry Potter books. She bought each one on the day of their release. Saw someone selling a copy of Chrono Trigger for SNES about 20 years ago. It was a great price and dude said for another $10 he'd throw in a bunch of other games he didn't want, including Star Fox. I was trying to start a collection at the time and figured he'd give me a box of sport games and crap you usually see filling pawn shops etc, but I figured it's $10, so agreed. He gave me the box and thanked me for taking all the crap off his hands. I got in the car and looked through the games and there was a bunch of bad sports games and a few other meh games, but in amidst it all was this game that said Star Fox Weekend on it. I was like, WTF is that? Check eBay and the thing was selling for like $300 at the time. It's like a rare SNES cartridge they gave out to winners of a competition, or to other people who won one from Nintendo Power etc. I couldn't bring myself to bring it back, tell him. 10 years later I saw some lady on Craigslist looking for a copy of Chrono Trigger for her son for Christmas. I emailed her that I had it and when she came to grab it I just gave it to her for free to pay back the con of getting that super rare game in a $10 box of junk. The thing goes for like $1,000 on eBay now. I can't find my SNES and it's driving me nuts. So many games. FF3, SMRPG, SMW, Mario Kart. I could probably replace them all without breaking the bank completely, but I'm not sure if I'd even want them. My liver tumor and old liver. They both weren't doing me any good, but were made into slides and sent all over the country. Or so I was told by my surgeons, as it was so rare and unusual. Got to be in a medical journal, not valuable in a monetary sense but more of a scientific academic value. That's rather cool. I was very relieved when my dermatologist told me my mystery mole was of no medical interest whatsoever. Sorry, scientific community. Found some sunglasses in a parking lot covered in dirt. Washed them off and they turned out to be Ray-Bans. It was a pretty good day. I, too, found some Ray-Ban sunglasses while riding around. I have a main pair of sunglasses that I wear, but these found Ray-Bans are still my backups for 5+ years now. In 2004 my grandfather showed me a locked chest in the storage of his home when I was 15. Then he said to me the key is on my cabinet. He promised me to open it when he dies. I kept his promise until he died this January 2020. He died at 101 years old. I got the keys of the locked chest on his cabinet, then opened the chest. When I opened it, the things in there were mostly love letters, encyclopedias, maps, records from famous singers. But the valuable thing I found was jewelry and a Rolex and Seiko watch, which is under perfect condition. He dropped some loot for you, bruh. An old book in my grandfather's attic. It was slightly worn and seemed super boring, but I held onto it because I feel weird throwing away book. Turns out it is a first edition of a book that is over 100 years old and is worth a couple $1,000 even in its condition. Not valuable, but interesting. I was a kid living in South Carolina at the time, and at summer camp, was swimming in the river, when my foot kicked something jagged, pulled it up, and it was a severely rusted shackle like a prisoner. Or, remember, this was South Carolina, a slave would have worn. Found by accident, but pretty impactful history lesson. Not exactly junk, but I bought 2 vintage Pyrex bowls at a thrift store. Had no idea that style's actually collectible. I just needed a mixing bowl, and they were the same kind my mom had, so I knew they were good, sturdy bowls. Not sure exactly how much they're worth, but definitely more than the $10 or so I paid for the pair. I collect Pabst Blue Ribbon stuff. I have a cup full of bottle caps. The Pabst bottle caps have playing card number suits under them. I haven't gone through my caps in a while, but I wanted to see if I was any closer to having a full deck. So I empty my caps out onto the table and all of a sudden a coin falls out. A 1937 Washington quarter. 90% silver. I have no idea where it came from. My weird cap collection found me some silver. My dad ordered some LEDs and the company shipped white and blue LEDs by accident. This was when those were really expensive. 50 LEDs. He resold them on the trading post. Bought a mid-century Ottoman for $75, among other things, at an estate sale in NYC. Found out years later it's worth $3k. Bought a 1970s Roland TR-66 drum machine, granddaddy to the 808, for $7 at a flea market. All analog and made some cool noises. Had a lot of fun with it. Turns out it's worth several $100s or something. It had colorful buttons but cheesy wood grain sides and back. We had it stashed away in the garage for a bit with some crappy thrift store speakers, also wood grain. One day when we cleared out junk, my dad tossed it, while, for some unknown reason, keeping the speakers. Needless to say, I was a little well, easy come easy go. When I was 17, I found a driver's license on the ground from a guy who was 22 and resembled me a fair bit. Rarely had a problem getting into bars or clubs with it. It was priceless TBH. My friend did this years ago in college. At some point later in the year he was pulled over and had forgotten to swap his real ID back into his wallet after a night out and got pulled over. Gave the cop the fake ID on accident and got into a whole lawsuit for identity fraud or theft or some crap. Well, it's valuable to me. When I was younger I went to my granddad's farm. While there he showed me my great grandfather's rock collection. Just a bunch of interestingly shaped rocks. And my siblings and I were allowed to pick one to keep. There was a nice strippy blue one that caught my eye and I picked it. 5 years later there is a gemstone dealer in town. She has some beautiful jewelry and stones for sale, including some tiny pieces that look like mine. Turns out that I picked up a blue lace agate. I've kept it close ever since. Not me, but my mom. She lives in a senior's home. Somebody died, no family, so everyone just throws his crap in the trash. My mom went out by the dumpster before the garbage truck got there to see if anything was worth grabbing. But there was a very small lockbox, the cheap kind, and when she shook it, it sounded like it had a few coins inside. She worked all afternoon to jimmy it open and inside was over $600 cash and $250 in rare coins. An old coin just in the middle of a field when taking my dog out. I looked it up and it was an old English penny which was cool, worth between £5 and £25 or thereabouts. Keep it in my wallet. In high school one day I saw a quarter on the ground and picked it up. It was a 1898 quarter. How it got there I have no idea. I still have it. My family Bible. It disappeared for a while. Years ago a sibling of mine passed away. I was helping her children clean out her attic when I stumbled upon a box filled with old books. I was going through them and found one that was tattered and in rough shape. I was about to toss it aside when I decided to open up. Turns out it was the family Bible with a filled out family tree going back to the early 1700s. Quite the find, indeed. It's still in my possession. Would you believe my paternal grandfather was born in 1805? I would not have known that exact date had I not found it. Found an old discarded lamp on the street with a post-it that said broken, need some love. It was an old Merenz tune-up, a good brand, a good model. I picked it up on the way to my friend's place, and I told him this'll be your Christmas gift and he just laughed at me. Thought I couldn't make it work. So I brought it back home, checked it out. Turned out that all it needed was a bit of contact cleaner in strategic places. I built 2 bookshelf kind of speakers out of scrap wood that another friend had. The drivers and electronic components were pretty cheap. I capped it off with a used CD player still in amazing condition and a used turntable that worked just fine. All in all I must have spent maybe like $100. I built my friend an awesome stereo chain and he was so surprised when I delivered it. For me it was an awesome project. It was the best gift I ever gave away and it was really fun. Especially since before then, all he had was a crappy radio CD and like 5 CDs and no aux input, so we always ended up listening to music on phone speakers. Also my copy of NES Tetris is the Tengen version that was only available in stores for like 2 weeks in North America apparently. It's kind of rare and I've heard it's worth quite a bit with the original box and everything. Those Marantz are so dang expensive now with the vinyl resurgence. I bought mine for my record player a while back on Craigslist for around $100 and it's about $500-600 on eBay now. I was looking behind a custom auto shop and found this microscope magnifying thingy. It looked awesome but I couldn't convince my dad to let me get it. A day later he decides to let me get it and looky here, turns out to be a multi-$1,000 optical doctor microscope for viewing eyes. I also found a lens hardener in this giant laboratory looking cabinet with sinks and a ton of dials. I couldn't take it of course, so yeah. When I was 9 or 10 years old, I found some metal clips and a brooch while playing in some old ruins. Since our city has been there since Roman times, it was obvious that it might be really old, but usually, that stuff isn't worth much. Showed it to the archaeologists at the local museum and turned out it was gold. Everything. They asked where I found that, excavated the area again and found quite the stash of fine terra sigillata with coins and jewelry in it. I was allowed to keep 3 things and I chose a perfectly preserved dinner plate, a ring and a coin. Retro video game consoles, games and electronics. I love them because I love them, but they are often very valuable as well. I used to buy these things way before it was popular, like buying a full Sega Genesis, Sega CD, 32X and a ton of games for like $40 back in the day. Nowadays that crap is a goldmine. That's pretty cool. I'm not really sure why these are so scarce in North America, not sure about other regions, like Europe. In Japan, you can find a lot of second-hand retro consoles for sale in most major cities. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.